I was supposed to be dead. I was a breeder, a nameless, voiceless commodity, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. I had no weapons. I had no hope. And then he broke down my door. Alpha King Ethan, the wolf eater. A monster so consumed by the red madness that he slaughtered entire armies for sport. He didn't come to save me. He came to tear my throat out. He cornered me. His claws were at my neck. His eyes were burning with a bloodlust that had no end. I should have screamed. I should have run. Instead, I reached out. I touched the face of the devil, and I whispered the two words that would change the fate of the world. Good boy. I expected death. Instead, the monster dropped to his knees. The madness in his eyes cleared. He looked up at me, not with hunger, but with worship. I thought I had tamed the beast. I was wrong. I hadn't tamed him. I had just given him a new obsession, and now he isn't letting me go.
Chapter 1: The Golden Cage. My world was defined by the boundaries of a gilded fence. To the outside world, the Moon Shadow Pack was a beacon of civility and power. To me, it was a marketplace. I wasn't a person, I was a breeder. A rare, fertile she-wolf whose lineage was so pure it was considered a commodity. I sat on the window seat of my tower room, pressing my hand against the cold glass. Down below, in the courtyard, the preparations for the winter auction were underway. Alpha Marcus, my captor, my alpha, was directing the workers as they set up the same stage where I would be sold to the highest bidder in 3 days. "Don't touch the glass, Betty." A sharp voice cut through my thoughts. "You'll leave smudges." I flinched, pulling my hand back. My handler, a severe woman named Greta, stood in the doorway with a tray of food. It was rich food: roast duck, wine, honey cakes. They fattened me up like a prize pig. "Sorry, Greta," I whispered, my voice rusty from disuse. I rarely spoke. Silence was safer. "Eat," she commanded, setting the tray down. "Alpha Marcus wants you glowing for the buyers. The northern packs are coming. They pay well for breeders." I looked at the food, nausea rolling in my stomach. I wasn't just a breeder. I had a secret. A terrifying, lethal secret that I had guarded since I was a child. I had the voice. It was a power usually reserved for true alphas, a vocal resonance that could force any wolf to obey. If Marcus knew, he wouldn't sell me. He would kill me. Or worse, he would cut out my tongue and breed me anyway. "I'm not hungry," I said. "I don't care," Greta snapped. She walked over and grabbed my chin, forcing my face up. Her grip was bruising. She released me and left, locking the heavy oak door behind her. The click of the lock was the soundtrack of my life. I ate the food, not because I wanted to, but because I needed strength. I had a plan. Tonight, during the chaos of the pre-auction feast, I was going to run. I had stolen a knife from the dinner tray yesterday. It was small, dull, and pathetic, but it was the only weapon I had. I waited until the moon rose high, casting silver bars across the floor. The sounds of revelry drifted up from the great hall. Drunken laughter, the clinking of glasses. They were celebrating my sale. I went to the door. I pulled the knife from under my mattress. I was about to try and pick the lock when a sound shattered the night. It wasn't laughter. It was a scream. And then another. And another. The loud boom of the main gates being smashed inward shook the very stones of the tower. I ran to the window. Below, the courtyard was a slaughterhouse. Wolves, huge, scarred, feral beasts, were pouring through the broken gates. They weren't moon shadow wolves, they were rogues, and leading them was a monster. He was the largest wolf I had ever seen, his fur as black as a starless night, his eyes glowing with a terrifying blood-red light. He moved with a speed that blurred the vision, tearing through Marcus's elite guards like they were made of paper. The rogue alpha king. Ethan. I had heard the stories. They said he was mad. They said he had the red madness, a bloodlust so potent that it turned him into a mindless killing machine. As I watched, he shifted. The massive wolf dissolved into a man, a giant, naked, blood-soaked man who roared at the sky with a sound that vibrated in my very bones. He looked up. His red eyes locked onto my tower window, onto me. He didn't look away. He started running toward the tower. He wasn't coming to save me. He was coming to eat me. Chapter 2. The Beast in the Room. The sound of heavy boots thundering up the spiral staircase was the sound of my death approaching. I backed away from the door, clutching my pathetic butter knife. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear the screams dying out below, replaced by the silence of the dead. Bam! The heavy oak door shuddered. Bam! Splinters flew as wood cracked. The lock, which had kept me prisoner for years, gave way with a metallic screech. The door was kicked open so hard it smashed against the stone wall. Ethan filled the doorway. He was terrifying. He was at least 7 feet tall, his body a wall of muscle and scars. He was covered in blood, fresh, bright red blood that dripped from his hands and soaked his torn trousers. But it was his face that froze my blood. His eyes were glowing a solid, incandescent crimson. There was no pupil, no iris, just the red madness. His lips were pulled back in a snarl, revealing fangs that were too long, too sharp. I realized he wasn't a man. He was a rabid animal in human skin. He stepped into the room. The air instantly grew heavy, smelling of copper, ozone, and wet fur. His gaze swept the room, mindless and frantic, until it landed on me. "Mine," he rasped. The words sounded like gravel grinding together. "Kill. Mine." I scrambled backward until my legs hit the bed. "Stay back," I shouted, holding up the knife. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Ethan laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. He didn't even look at the knife. He walked toward me, slow and predatory. Every step was a threat. "No fight," he growled, tilting his head. "Breeder. Soft." He lunged. I screamed and slashed with the knife. The blade dragged across his massive bicep, leaving a thin red line. He didn't even flinch. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was like a steel shackle. He squeezed, and my hand went numb. The knife clattered to the floor. He yanked me forward, slamming my body against his hard, bloody chest. The heat radiating off him was intense, like standing next to a furnace. He smelled of violence and death, but beneath that was a scent of pine and rain that made my wolf whimper. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling deeply. His teeth grazed my pulse point. I could feel the vibration of his growl against my skin. He was going to tear my throat out. I was going to die here in this golden cage, just another victim of the madness. "Please," I whispered, tears leaking from my eyes. He pulled back. His red eyes bored into mine. The madness swirled in them, chaotic and consuming. He raised his hand, his claws extending, ready to strike. I looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the rage, beneath the bloodlust, I saw something else. I saw agony. He wasn't just angry, he was in pain. The madness was hurting him. My instinct kicked in. Not the instinct to run, but the instinct that had been hidden inside me since birth. I didn't pull away. I reached up. Chapter 3: The Forbidden Words. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. I looked straight into those terrifying, glowing red eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I let the power I had suppressed for 20 years rise in my throat. "Good boy," I whispered. The words carried a resonance that wasn't human. It was a command. A ripple of invisible energy pulsed from my lips, hitting him like a physical wave. Ethan flinched as if I had slapped him. His eyes widened. The solid crimson glow flickered, revealing a flash of stunned golden amber underneath. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. The tension in his massive body, the coil of violence that was ready to snap, suddenly unspooled. He didn't strike. He didn't tear my throat out. He dropped. The rogue alpha king, the monster who had just slaughtered an entire pack, fell to his knees in front of me. The movement was so sudden, so absolute, that his knees cracked against the stone floor. He looked up at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and profound relief. His hands, which had been ready to kill, fell to his sides. He slumped forward, resting his forehead against my stomach. "Quiet," he groaned, his voice thick and broken. The noise, it stopped. I stood there, frozen, my hand still hovering near his head. I had done it. I had used the voice, and it had worked. I looked down at the massive man kneeling at my feet. He was shaking. Tremors racked his body as if the adrenaline of the madness was leaving his system all at once. "Good boy," I said again, softer this time, testing his reaction. He let out a shuddering sigh, closing his eyes. He nuzzled into my stomach, inhaling my scent deep into his lungs. "Soft," he mumbled. "Smells like peace." I didn't know what to do. My plan had been to run. Now I had the most dangerous wolf in the world kneeling at my feet like a tamed dog. I looked at the open door. I could run. I could leave him here and flee into the woods. But as I shifted my weight to step back, Ethan's hand shot out. He grabbed my ankle. It wasn't a painful grip, but it was unbreakable. He looked up. The red was creeping back into his eyes, fighting the gold. "Don't go," he rasped. "Need voice. Need you." "I can't stay here. Your pack, they'll kill me." "No," he growled. He stood up, towering over me. The submission was gone, replaced by a fierce, possessive clarity. He reached out and scooped me up into his arms. I gasped, clutching his bloody shoulders for balance. "You come," he stated. It wasn't a question. "You keep the madness away." "You're kidnapping me," I asked, my heart pounding. "Saving you," he corrected. He looked at the door, then back at me. "They were selling you. I am keeping you." He turned and walked out of the room, carrying me down the stairs, stepping over the bodies of my former captors. He didn't look back. He held me tight against his chest, as if I were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth.
Chapter 4: The Badlands Run. The journey out of the Moonshadow territory was a blur of wind and terror. Ethan didn't use a car. He didn't use a horse. He ran. He had shifted back into his massive black wolf form, carrying me on his back. I clung to his thick fur, my face buried in his neck to shield myself from the biting wind. He moved with a speed that was supernatural, eating up the miles, his paws thundering against the earth. We were heading into the Badlands, the lawless, rugged terrain where the rogue packs lived.
It was a place of nightmares, a place where civilized wolves didn't go. But strangely, I didn't feel unsafe. Beneath me, I could feel the steady, powerful rhythm of Ethan's heart. Every time I shifted or tightened my grip, he would let out a low, rumbling purr in his chest, a sound of contentment. It was bizarre. The monster who had slaughtered 50 guards was purring because I was holding him. Hours passed. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. Ethan slowed. We had reached the edge of a deep canyon. The Badlands stretched out before us, a landscape of jagged red rock and twisted trees. He knelt, letting me slide off his back. My legs were wobbly. I stumbled, and he caught me instantly. He shifted back into human form. He was naked again, but he didn't seem to care. He was looking at me with an intensity that made me burn. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was rough, but the madness was gone from his eyes. They were a clear, piercing amber. "I'm fine," I said, looking away from his body. "Just tired." "We are almost there," he said. He reached out and touched my cheek, wiping away a smudge of dirt. His fingers were calloused and hot. "You did well, little voice." "My name is Betty," I said, finding a scrap of courage. "Betty." He tasted the name. He smiled, a slow, dangerous expression that made his scars stretch. "A small name for a big power." He turned and walked to a pile of rocks, pulling out a stash of clothes, leather trousers and a thick fur cloak. He dressed quickly, then threw the cloak over my shoulders. It was huge on me, smelling of him. "Walk with me," he said. "The pack needs to see you walk in on your own feet. If I carry you, they will think you are prey." "What will they think if I walk?" I asked, pulling the cloak tight. "They will think you are queen," he said simply. He took my hand. His hand was massive, swallowing mine completely. He laced our fingers together. "Do not let go," he warned as we started walking toward the fortress in the distance. "My wolves are hungry. If you show fear, they will bite. If you hold my hand, they will bow." "And if I command them?" I asked, testing the waters. Ethan stopped. He looked down at me. His eyes darkened with a strange emotion. "Arousal?" "If you command them," he whispered, squeezing my hand, "they will worship you, just as I intend to." Chapter 5: The Iron Den. The fortress of the Rogue King was not a castle. It was a fortress of scrap metal and stone, built into the side of a cliff. It looked like a scar on the face of the mountain. As we approached the gates, the smell hit me. Smoke, roasting meat, and unwashed bodies. The Badlands were wild. Scores of wolves poured out to meet us. They were rough, scarred, missing ears and tails. They were the unwanted, the exiled. They looked at Ethan with reverence, but they looked at me with open hostility. "Fresh meat," one shouted. "Who is the girl, Alpha?" he sneered, stepping forward. He was missing an eye. "Did you bring us a snack?" Ethan growled. The sound was so deep, it vibrated in the ground. He pulled me flush against his side. "This is not meat," Ethan roared, his alpha voice booming across the clearing. "This is Betty. She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her loses the hand." The one-eyed wolf didn't back down. "She smells like a breeder. We haven't had a male in months, Alpha. Share." Ethan released my hand. He moved so fast I didn't see it. One second he was beside me, the next he had the one-eyed wolf by the throat, lifting him 3 feet off the ground. "I said," he whispered, the red madness flickering in his eyes again, "she is mine." He threw the wolf. The man flew 20 feet and crashed into a pile of crates, unconscious. Silence fell over the courtyard. Ethan turned back to me. His chest was heaving. The red was bleeding back into his irises. He was losing control again. The violence triggered the curse. He strode over to me, grabbed my wrist, and dragged me toward the main keep. "Inside," he snapped. "Now." He pulled me through the metal corridors, ignoring the stares of his people. He kicked open a heavy iron door at the top of the fortress. It was his room. It was surprisingly clean, dominated by a massive bed of furs and a large fireplace. He shoved me inside and slammed the door. I heard the heavy thud of a lock sliding into place. "Ethan," I called out, rushing to the door. "Let me out!" "No!" he roared from the other side. "You stay. Safe. I need to hunt. I need to burn it off." "Burn what off?" I asked, leaning against the wood. "The rage," he groaned. I could hear him sliding down the door on the other side. "You made it stop, but the fight brought it back. I am dangerous, Betty. I will hurt you if I stay." "Ethan, let me help," I said. "I can use the voice." "No," he shouted. "Don't use it. Not yet. It feels too good. It's addictive. I need to clear my head." He stood up. I heard his footsteps retreating. "Stay in the room," he commanded, his voice fading. "Don't open the door for anyone. I will come back when I am a man again." I was alone, locked in the bedroom of a mad king, surrounded by an army of savages. I walked to the bed and sat down. The furs smelled like him, pine and rain. I touched my neck where his nose had brushed. My skin still tingled. He had locked me in, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt like a treasure being guarded. I lay down, clutching his pillow, and waited for the beast to return.
Chapter 6. The Withdrawal. The door didn't open for hours. I sat on the bed, listening to the sounds of the fortress. It was a cacophony of shouts, clanging metal, and the distant, eerie howls of wolves. This wasn't a pack, it was an army of broken things. As night fell, the temperature in the room dropped. The fire in the hearth had died down to embers. Then, the screaming started. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. It came from down the hall, echoing through the metal walls like a shockwave. Crash! Something heavy slammed into the wall outside my door, then the sound of claws shredding metal. "Alpha, stop!" a voice shouted. "It's us! It's your guard!" "Snarl! Quiet! Make it quiet!" It was Ethan. I jumped off the bed, backing away as the heavy iron door to my room shook. Someone was throwing themselves against it from the outside. The lock held for 2 hits. On the third, the hinges screamed and twisted. The door fell inward with a deafening clang. Ethan stood in the opening. He looked worse than he had in the tower. He was sweating profusely, his skin pale and clammy. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown so large they were almost black, rimmed by a frantic, bleeding red. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He looked like an addict in withdrawal. "Betty," he choked out. He took a step into the room and collapsed. He didn't fall gracefully. He crashed to his knees, catching himself on his hands. He was hyperventilating. "Make it stop," he begged, clawing at his own ears. "The noise! It's back! It's louder!" I realized then what the madness was. It wasn't just rage. It was a sensory overload. He was hearing too much, feeling too much. His alpha senses were turned up so high, they were torturing him.
I overcame my fear. I walked toward him. "Ethan?" I whispered. He flinched at the sound of his name, but he leaned toward me. He crawled the last few feet until his head was pressed against my knees. He wrapped his massive arms around my legs, burying his face in the fabric of my trousers. "Say it," he pleaded, his voice a broken sob. "Use the voice. Leash me." Chapter 7. The Bargain. I looked down at the king of the Badlands, shivering at my feet. I placed my hand on his sweaty, fever-hot head. His hair was thick and matted with dried blood from the earlier fight. "Quiet," I said softly, threading a small thread of command into the word. Ethan gasped. His body went limp against me. The tension drained out of his muscles as if I had cut a string. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "Better," he murmured. "Gods, better." He didn't let go of my legs. He stayed there, kneeling, breathing in the scent of my clothes. "You need me," I realized aloud. Ethan looked up. The red in his eyes had receded, leaving behind that piercing amber. He looked exhausted, but lucid. "I am dying, Betty," he admitted, his voice rough. "The madness is eating my mind. Every day is a war, until you." He reached up and took my hand, pressing his cheek into my palm. "You are the only silence I have ever known." I looked at the open door where a few terrified guards were peering in. They saw their king on his knees. They saw me standing over him. The power dynamic had shifted. He wasn't my captor. He was my dependent. "If I stay," I said, my voice steady, "I have conditions." "Conditions." He narrowed his eyes, the alpha pride flickering for a second. "I am not a prisoner. I am not a breeder. You do not lock this door. You do not touch me unless I allow it. And you never, ever look at me like meat again." Ethan stared at me. He slowly rose to his feet, towering over me. He was still terrifying, still a giant wall of muscle and violence. But he nodded. "Agreed," he rumbled. "You are not a prisoner. You are the anchor." He pointed at the door. "But do not leave the fortress. My enemies will hunt you to get to me." "I won't leave," I promised, "as long as you keep your end of the bargain." "What is my end?" "You need a bath," I said, wrinkling my nose. "You smell like a slaughterhouse." Chapter 8. The Bath. The bathroom attached to the master suite was carved from black obsidian. In the center was a massive sunken tub, fed by a natural hot spring that smelled faintly of sulfur and minerals. Steam filled the room, damp and heavy. Ethan stood by the edge of the tub, looking uncomfortable. He was a creature of the wild. I doubted he indulged in luxuries often. He stripped off his ruined trousers without a shred of shame. I'd tried to look away, but it was impossible. He was magnificent. Every inch of him was corded muscle and old scars. He was built for war. He stepped into the steaming water with a hiss of relief, sinking down until it lapped at his chest. The water turned pink instantly as the dried blood dissolved. "I wash," I commanded softly. He looked at me, then at the sponge and soap sitting on the ledge. He didn't move. He looked at his hands, massive, scarred hands that had killed dozens of men just hours ago. They were shaking slightly. I can't reach the back," he muttered, looking away. He was lying. He just wanted me to touch him. He wanted the contact. I sighed and picked up the sponge. I rolled up my sleeves and knelt by the edge of the tub. "Turn around," I said. He obeyed instantly. I lathered the sponge. I touched his back. His skin was hot, scorching hot. He flinched at the first touch, a low growl rumbling in his throat, but then he leaned into it. I scrubbed the grime from his skin. I traced the jagged lines of white scars that crisscrossed his spine. Whip marks, bite marks. "Who did this to you?" I whispered, tracing a particularly nasty scar on his shoulder blade. "The council," he rasped, his eyes closed. "Before I broke free, they tried to break me." "They failed," I said. "Did they?" he asked darkly. "I am mad. Betty. Broken things don't work right." "You're working right now," I said, pouring warm water over his shoulders to rinse the soap. He turned around in the water, his amber eyes locked onto mine. He reached out, his wet hand covering mine on the rim of the tub. "Because you are here," he whispered. The air in the bathroom shifted. It wasn't just steam anymore, it was tension. He looked at my lips. I looked at the water beating on his chest. "Finish washing," I said, my voice breathless. I pulled my hand away and stood up. "I'll find you a towel." Chapter 9. The Leash. Over the next few days, we fell into a strange, intense routine. Ethan couldn't be away from me for more than a few hours before the tremor started. He would prowl the fortress, growling at his men until he found me. I decided to test the limits of my power. We were in the mess hall. The rogues ate like animals, tearing meat with their hands, fighting over scraps. Ethan sat at the head table, glaring at a lieutenant who had challenged his order. The air was growing thick with aggression. Ethan's eyes were flashing red. He was about to snap the lieutenant's neck. I walked up to the table. I put my hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Sit," I said. I pushed my will into the word. Ethan, who had been rising from his chair, slammed back down into it. The wood creaked under his weight. The entire mess hall went silent. The lieutenant stared, his jaw dropping. No one commanded the Alpha King. Ethan looked up at me. He wasn't angry. He looked turned on. His pupils dilated. He liked it. He liked that I could control the monster he couldn't. "Eat," I commanded, pushing a plate of roasted venison toward him. Ethan picked up a piece of meat, his eyes never leaving mine. He took a bite, chewing slowly, watching me with a predatory intensity. "Good boy," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. A shiver went through him. He leaned forward, his voice a low rumble that vibrated the table. "Be careful, Betty," he warned, a dark smirk touching his lips. "You are holding a leash attached to a tiger. If you pulled too hard, I might just bite you." "You wouldn't," I challenged. "You like the leash." "I like who is holding it," he corrected. Chapter 10. The First Touch. That night, the storm outside the fortress was fierce. Thunder shook the walls. I was reading by the fire in our shared room. He still insisted I sleep there, though he slept on the floor on a pile of furs like a guard dog. Ethan was sharpening a massive sword. The shink, shink, shink of the whetstone was rhythmic, hypnotic. He stopped. "You are cold," he stated. I was. The fortress was drafty. I rubbed my arms. "I'm fine." He stood up and walked over to me. He was shirtless, as always. He radiated heat like a wood stove. He reached out. He didn't ask this time. He ran his large, rough hand down my bare arm. The sensation was electric. His skin was calloused, hot, and dry. My skin bumped with gooseflesh, not from the cold, but from the sheer shock of his touch. "You are freezing," he murmured. He sat down on the rug beside my chair. He took my bare feet into his lap. His hands were huge, engulfing them completely. He began to rub them, warming them up. It was such an intimate, domestic gesture. "Why do you do this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You are a king, and I am a breeder." "You are not a breeder," he growled, his grip tightening slightly. "Do not use that word. You are the only person who sees me." He looked up at me. The firelight danced in his amber eyes. "You smell like peace, Betty," he confessed. "When I touch you, the world stops spinning." His foot lifted and he pressed a kiss to my ankle. My breath hitched, heat pooled in my belly, sharp and sudden. "Ethan," I warned. "I know," he said, lowering my foot but keeping his hand on my calf. His thumb stroked my skin, a slow, maddening rhythm. "I won't cross the line, but let me warm you, please." I didn't pull away. I let the monster warm me, and for the first time I wondered what it would feel like if he didn't stop at my ankle.
Chapter 11. The Jealousy. The fortress was a place of constant noise and movement, but in the center of it all, I found a strange sort of peace with Ethan. He kept his promise, he didn't lock the door, he didn't touch me unless I leaned into him, but he was always there. He was a shadow that radiated heat, following me through the halls, watching me while I read, sleeping at the foot of my bed. But peace in the Badlands was fragile. One afternoon, we were in the training yard. Ethan was sparring with his beta, a massive wolf named Call. I sat on a bench nearby, wrapped in furs, watching the muscles ripple across Ethan's back as he fought. "You shouldn't be here," a female voice sneered. I looked up. A she-wolf stood over me. She was beautiful in a hard, jagged way, tall, scarred, with wild red hair. Her name was Mara. She was one of Ethan's top warriors, and she had made it clear from day one that she hated me. "The Alpha said I could watch," I replied quietly. "The Alpha is sick. He thinks you're a cure, but you're just a weak, scentless human thing, a pet." She reached out, grabbing a handful of my hair. "You don't belong here. You make him weak." "Let go," I gasped, trying to pull away. "Or what?" Mara laughed. "You'll cry?" Before I could answer, a roar shook the courtyard. Ethan was there in a heartbeat. He didn't run, he blurred. He slammed into Mara, tackling her to the dirt. He pinned her down, his hand around her throat, his claws digging deep enough to draw blood. "I told you," Ethan snarled, his eyes flashing red. The madness was back, triggered by the threat to me. "Touch her, and you die." Mara choked, her eyes bulging. She clawed at his arm, but he was immovable. He was going to kill her, right there in front of the pack. The other wolves watched in silence. No one moved to help her. "Ethan!" I shouted, running forward. He didn't hear me. His wolf was in control. He raised his free hand, claws extending, ready to rip her chest open. I grabbed his shoulder. His skin was burning hot. "Stop!" I commanded. "Ethan, look at me. Stop!" The voice hit him. He froze. His hand hovered inches from Mara's chest. He turned his head slowly. His red eyes met mine. For a second, he didn't recognize me. He looked at me like I was just another enemy. "It's me," I whispered, my hand trembling on his skin. "It's Betty. Let her go." He blinked. The red faded to amber. He looked down at Mara, then back at me. He released her and stood up, backing away as if burned. Mara scrambled away, gasping for air, clutching her throat. Ethan looked at his hands, shaking. I almost... "You protected me," I said, stepping closer to him in front of everyone. "But you don't need to kill for me." He looked at me, his expression raw. "She touched you. She pulled my hair. She didn't hurt me." "She touched what is 9.
he growled. The entire courtyard heard it. Mine.
Chapter 12. The King's Nightmare. That night, the fortress was quiet, but the king was not. I woke up to a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a roar, it was a whimper. Ethan was thrashing on the floor beside the bed. He was caught in a nightmare, his limbs jerking, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "No," he moaned in his sleep. "Don't, brother, please." I slipped out of bed and knelt beside him. His skin was slick with sweat. He was burning up. "Ethan," I whispered, "wake up." His eyes snapped open. They were wide with terror. He didn't see me. He saw the past. He saw the betrayal that had broken him. He scrambled backward, pressing himself into the corner of the room, covering his head with his arms. "Don't look at me," he choked out. "Don't look at the monster." My heart broke for him. This massive, terrifying king was just a boy who had been hurt by the people who were supposed to love him. I crawled over to him. I didn't use the voice. I didn't command him. I just held him. I wrapped my arms around his broad shoulders. I pulled his heavy head down to my chest. I rocked him. "Shh," I soothed, stroking his damp hair. "I've got you. You're safe. I'm here." He shook apart in my arms. He wept. Great, heaving sobs that tore through his chest. He clung to me like a drowning man clinging to a raft. "They took everything," he whispered into my nightgown. "They took my pack. They took my mind." "They didn't take everything," I said fiercely. "They didn't take you. You're still here. You're still the king." He looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, vulnerable. "I am broken," he said. "So am I," I replied. "We fit." He didn't go back to the floor that night. I pulled him up onto the bed. He lay with his head in my lap, his arm thrown over my waist, and I stayed awake all night, stroking his hair, guarding the monster while he slept. Chapter 13. The Scent of Arousal. The dynamic shifted after that night. Ethan wasn't just possessive, he was attentive. He watched me constantly, not like a guard, but like a lover. And I was reacting. My body, which had been dormant and cold for so long, was waking up. Every time he walked into a room, my heart raced. Every time his arm brushed mine, I felt a jolt of heat. I was in the library, trying to read, but I couldn't focus. Ethan was sitting across the room, sharpening a dagger. He wasn't wearing a shirt. The firelight played over his muscles, highlighting every scar, every ridge of power. I shifted in my chair, my thighs clenching. A scent filled the air, sweet, heavy, and undeniable. Ethan stopped sharpening. His head snapped up. His nostrils flared. He inhaled deeply. He stood up and walked toward me. He moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made my mouth go dry. He stopped in front of my chair. He placed his hands on the armrests, trapping me. "You smell different," he rumbled, his voice low and rough. I don't know what you mean," I stammered, my face heating up. He leaned down. He buried his face in the crook of my neck. He inhaled again, a long, slow drag of air. "Honey," he whispered against my skin, "and spice, and want." He pulled back, his amber eyes burning into mine. "You want me," he stated. It wasn't a question. I tried to look away, but he caught my chin. "Don't hide from me, Betty. I can smell your heartbeat. I can smell your arousal." "I'm scared,"
I admitted. Of me? Of how much I want you. You're dangerous, Ethan. You break things. I would never break you, he vowed. I would tear the world apart to keep you whole. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine, a feather-light touch that sent sparks through my entire body. Tell me to stop, he challenged. Use the voice. Command me to leave. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't want him to stop.
Chapter 14. The Throne. The next day, Ethan held court in the Great Hall. He sat on his throne of twisted iron and black stone. He looked every inch the barbarian king. His general stood before him, giving reports on the border skirmishes. I stood to the side watching. "Come here," Ethan commanded, interrupting his beta mid-sentence. He held out his hand to me. The hall went silent. Everyone watched. I walked up the dais steps. I took his hand. He didn't pull me to stand beside him. He pulled me down. He sat me on his lap. A collective gasp went through the room. To sit on the alpha's lap was a claim. It was a declaration of ownership and protection. It said, "This is my mate. This is my queen." I stiffened, embarrassed. "Ethan, everyone is watching." "Let them watch," he growled, wrapping his arm around my waist, locking me in place. "Let them see who holds the king." He looked out at his men. "Continue," he ordered Kyle. He conducted the rest of the meeting with me on his lap. His hand rubbed circles on my hip. His chin rested on my shoulder. He whispered comments in my ear, making me smile. I looked out at the sea of faces. Mara was there, scowling, but the others, they looked at me with respect, because the king respected me. I realized then that I wasn't just a breeder anymore. I wasn't a victim. Sitting on his lap, surrounded by his strength, I felt powerful. Chapter 15. The Edge. That night, the tension finally snapped. We were in the bedroom. I was brushing my hair. Ethan came up behind me, taking the brush from my hand. He began to stroke my hair, his movements slow and hypnotic. "You are beautiful." He turned me around. He kissed me. It wasn't the gentle kiss from the library. It was hungry. It was demanding. He kissed me until my knees gave out. Then he lifted me onto the vanity table. His hands were everywhere, on my waist, my thighs, my breasts. He touched me with a reverence and a greed that made my head spin. He dropped to his knees between my legs. "Ethan?" I gasped. He didn't answer. He buried his face in me. The pleasure was blinding. It was sharp, hot, and overwhelming. I tangled my fingers in his hair, arching my back, crying out his name. He took me to the edge again and again, but he wouldn't let me fall. Every time I was close, he stopped. He soothed me. Then he started again. "Please," I begged, panting. "Please, Ethan." He looked up. His face was wet, his eyes dark with lust. "Command me," he growled. "Use the voice. Tell me what you want." He was giving me the power. Even in this, he was letting me hold the leash. I looked down at my king, kneeling between my thighs, waiting for my order. I took a deep breath. I let the power rise. I commanded. Ethan groaned a sound of pure worship. And he obeyed. Chapter 16. The Claiming. He didn't just obey. He worshipped. When I gave the command, Ethan's control, that iron will he held onto so tightly, shattered.
He rose from his knees, his movements a blur of desperate, starving grace. He didn't tackle me, he enveloped me. His massive arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me off the vanity table and carrying me to the bed as if I weighed nothing more than a feather. The furs rose up to meet us, soft and cool against my heated skin, but I barely felt them. All I felt was him. "You commanded," he rasped, his voice a rough vibration against my throat. "Now you take the consequences." He kissed me, and it wasn't just lips meeting lips, it was a collision of souls. His taste was dark, cedar, rain, and the metallic tang of suppressed violence. He kissed me like he was drowning, and I was the air. When we finally joined, the sensation was so intense my vision blurred. It wasn't pain, it was a feeling of being completely, utterly filled. The hollowness that had defined my life as a breeder, as a commodity, vanished. I wasn't empty space anymore. I was solid. I was real. "Look at me," Ethan ordered, his eyes glowing a fierce, possessive amber. He interlaced our fingers, pinning my hands above my head. "I want to see you feel it. I want to see you take your king." I met his gaze. I let him see everything. The need, the love, the absolute surrender. "I'm yours," I whispered. "Forever," he vowed. The rhythm he set was ancient and demanding. With every movement, the bond between us tightened. It was a golden thread pulling taut in my chest, vibrating with his emotions. I felt his fierce protectiveness, his awe, his overwhelming relief that he wasn't alone in the dark anymore. As the peak approached, the air in the room grew heavy, charged with ozone and magic. "Betty," he groaned, burying his face in the crook of my neck. "My silence, my soul." His teeth grazed the sensitive skin over my mating mark. My wolf, usually so quiet, howled in my mind, demanding the mark. "Do it," I begged, arching into him. "Mark me, Ethan. Make it real." He didn't hesitate. He sank his fangs into my neck. The pain was sharp, a shock of ice and fire, followed instantly by a rush of endorphins so potent I cried out. His venom flooded my veins, rewriting my biology, binding his life force to mine. I bit his shoulder in return, tasting his blood, sealing the pact. We shattered together. The release was cataclysmic, a white-hot wave that left us trembling and breathless in the aftermath. I lay there as the world slowly stopped spinning, wrapped in the arms of the monster who loved me. The mark on my neck throbbed, a permanent reminder. I was no longer a girl who could be sold. I was the mate of the Alpha King.
Chapter 17. The Betrayal. The peace lasted for exactly 4 hours. I was asleep, my head resting on Ethan's chest, listening to the slow, powerful beat of his heart. The room was dark, the fire having died down to embers. Then the alarms screamed. It wasn't the bell of the fortress. It was a magical siren, a high-pitched wail that pierced the skull. Ethan woke instantly. 1 second he was asleep, the next he was standing by the bed, shifting into a defensive crouch, a low snarl ripping from his throat. "What is it?" I gasped, sitting up and clutching the sheet. "Silver," Ethan hissed, sniffing the air, "and council magic." The heavy iron door to our room exploded inward. It wasn't kicked in, it was blasted by a spell. Smoke and debris filled the room. Through the haze, figures emerged. They weren't rogues. They wore the pristine white cloaks of the High Council enforcers. They held nets woven from silver and spell wire.
Ethan of the Badlands. You are accused of stealing a breeder. Surrender. She is my mate, Ethan roared. He shifted. The transformation was instant. The man vanished, replaced by the massive black wolf. He launched himself at the intruders. He tore the first enforcer in half, but there were too many of them, and they had come prepared. Now, the leader shouted. They threw the nets. The silver mesh hit Ethan midair. It sizzled as it touched his fur. He howled, a sound of agony that shattered my heart. The magic in the net flared, forcing him to the ground. It didn't just burn him, it dampened his strength. No! I screamed. I tried to use the voice. Stop! I command you to... An enforcer moved faster than I could react. He clamped a metal collar around my neck. My voice died in my throat. The collar hummed, neutralizing my vocal cords. I choked, clawing at the metal, but no sound came out. Ethan saw them touch me. He went berserk. He thrashed against the silver net, burning his own skin to get to me. Don't kill him yet, the leader sneered. The council wants to make an example of the rogue king. They hit him with tranquilizer darts, dozens of them. Ethan's struggles slowed. His eyes, glowing with rage and love, locked into mine one last time before they rolled back in his head. They dragged him away, leaving a trail of blood on the stone floor. I was thrown into a corner, ignored. To them, I was just a breeder, valuable but harmless without my voice. They left, locking the broken door with a magical seal. I was alone. The king was gone.
Chapter 18. The Silence. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. I sat on the floor, my hands pulling uselessly at the collar around my neck. It was spelled. I couldn't remove it. I couldn't speak. I couldn't command. Outside, the fortress was in chaos. I could hear the rogues howling in confusion. Their alpha was gone. The anchor was silent. The madness was starting to bleed back into the atmosphere. Without Ethan to lead them, they were turning on each other, panic spreading like a virus. If I did nothing, the Silver Fang Legion would tear itself apart before the sun rose. I crawled to the window. Down in the courtyard, fires were burning. Fights were breaking out. They need a leader, I thought. But I wasn't a leader. I was a breeder. I was a girl who had spent her life in a tower. No, a voice inside me whispered, you are the queen. I looked at the mating mark on my shoulder. It throbbed, a dull ache connecting me to Ethan. He was alive. I could feel his pain, a distant, muffled agony. He was suffering. The fear evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard rage settled in my stomach. They had taken my mate. They had hurt my good boy. I stood up. I walked to the mirror. I looked at the pale girl with the metal collar. Fix this, I mouthed to my reflection. I looked around the room for a weapon. I found Ethan's secondary dagger, a heavy blade made of obsidian glass, tucked under the mattress. I took it. I went to the door. The magical seal glowed blue. I didn't have magic. I didn't have my voice. But I had something else. I remembered what Ethan told me about being a conduit, about moving energy. I placed my hand on the seal. It burned me, sending shocks up my arm. I am not a sponge, I thought. I am a pipe. I grabbed the pain of the seal. I pulled it into my body, let it sear my veins, and then I pushed it back out, doubled.
The seal shattered with a crack like a gunshot. The door swung open. I walked out into the hallway. I wasn't Betty the breeder anymore. I was the woman who held the leash of the devil, and I was going to get him back. Chapter 19. The Voice of the Queen. I walked out onto the main balcony overlooking the courtyard. The scene below was anarchy. Rogues were fighting, tearing at each other in their panic. The council's attack had left them leaderless and terrified. I needed to stop them, but I couldn't speak. The collar was still tight around my throat. I grabbed a torch from the wall. I climbed up onto the railing, standing high above the chaos. I threw the torch into the center of the fighting. The sudden flare of fire made them flinch. Heads turned. Hundreds of feral eyes locked onto me. They saw a small woman in a torn nightgown standing against the storm. They saw the collar. "It's the breeder," one shouted. "Where is the king?" I couldn't answer, so I showed them. I reached up to the collar. It was made of reinforced steel and magic. It shouldn't have been possible to break. But I was mated to an alpha king. His strength was bleeding into me through the bond. I gritted my teeth. I dug my fingers under the metal band. I pulled. The metal dug into my skin. Blood trickled down my neck. It hurt. God, it hurt. But the pain was fuel. I screamed, a silent, internal scream of pure fury, and pulled. Snap. The locking mechanism shattered. The collar fell from my neck, clattering onto the stones below. The courtyard went deadly silent. I took a deep breath. The cold air rushed into my lungs, sweet and free. I magnified my voice, pouring every ounce of my power into it. "Kneel!" The command hit them like a physical blow. 300 road wolves dropped to their knees in unison. The sound of armor hitting dirt was deafening. "Your king has been taken," I announced, my voice booming off the canyon walls. "The council thinks we are broken. They think we are savages who will eat each other the moment the leash is dropped." I looked down at them. "Are you savages?" I demanded. "Or are you the Silver Fang Legion?" A low growl started in the throat of the beta, Kale. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with respect. "We are the Legion," Kill roared. "Then get up," I commanded. "Sharpen your claws. We are not waiting for them to come back. We are going to the council." I raised the obsidian dagger. "And we are going to burn their city to the ground." The council's dungeon was a place of nightmares, hidden beneath their marble capital. The Legion was fighting above, creating a chaotic distraction. I had slipped in through the sewers, guided by the pull of the mating bond. The air smelled of rot and silver. I found the main chamber. In the center, suspended by heavy silver chains hooked into the ceiling, was Ethan. He looked dead. His body was a mass of burns and cuts. He was hanging limp, his head bowed. Standing in front of him was a man in a butcher's apron, the High Torturer. He held a branding iron glowing white-hot. "Wake up, beast," the torturer sneered, pressing the iron to Ethan's chest. Ethan didn't move. I didn't think. I charged. "Get away from him!" I screamed. The torturer spun around. He was fast, too fast for a human. He moved with supernatural speed. He backhanded me before I could use the voice. I flew backward, slamming into the stone wall. My vision swam. The torturer laughed. The breeder came to play. He walked over to me, grabbing me by the throat. He lifted me off the ground. His grip was a vice. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I kicked at him, but it was useless. He was crushing my windpipe. Black spots danced in my eyes. I looked past him. Ethan's head had lifted. He saw me. He saw the man choking me. His eyes flickered. The amber was gone. The red was back. But he was weak. The silver chains were draining him. He pulled, but they held. He roared in frustration, a weak, broken sound. I realized then that my voice wouldn't work on the torturer. He was deaf to it. But Ethan was listening. I needed to trigger the one thing the council feared most. I needed the feral beast. I clawed at the torturer's hand, buying myself a split second of air. I looked straight at Ethan. I screamed one word, not in the common tongue, but in the ancient tongue that Ethan had taught me during our nights in the library. Drazal! Attack. It was the command for absolute, unthinking slaughter. The effect was instantaneous. Ethan's pupils vanished. His muscles bulged, tearing the skin. The red madness didn't just return, it exploded. He didn't pull against the chains this time, he snapped them. With a roar that shook the dungeon foundation, Ethan broke the silver links as if they were paper. He dropped to the floor, a blurred mass of violence. The torturer froze, his eyes widening in shock. He turned his head. It was the opening I needed. I didn't wait to be rescued. I stomped my heel down on the torturer's instep with all my strength, shattering the small bones of his foot. He yelled, his grip loosening. I didn't pull away. I drove my elbow backward, aiming not for his chest, but for the soft spot under his ribs. The liver. He grunted, doubling over, dropping me. I hit the floor and scrambled backward. The beast arrived. A black shadow flew over me. Ethan slammed into the torturer. There was no fight. There was only butchery. Ethan tore the man apart with his bare hands and teeth. It was brutal. It was fast. It was the justice of a king. When the torturer was nothing but a ruin on the floor, Ethan turned to me. He was panting, covered in blood, his eyes glowing solid red. He looked ready to kill anything that moved. I didn't run. I stood up. I walked through the blood. I reached up and touched his face. "Good boy," I whispered. "He's gone. You got him." The red faded. Ethan collapsed into my arms, burying his face in my neck, shaking. "Betty, you came." He sobbed. We didn't run from the dungeon. We ascended. Ethan leaned heavily on me, his massive frame trembling with the aftershocks of the silver and the torture. His skin was hot, feverish against my own, but his eyes were clear. The red madness was there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was no longer a wildfire burning out of control. It was a focused beam, and I was the one holding the lens. "Can you fight?" I asked, my voice echoing in the stone stairwell. "For you?" Ethan growled, a low subterranean rumble that vibrated in my chest. "I could tear down the sky." We reached the heavy double doors that led to the council's main chamber. I could hear the sounds of battle on the other side, the clash of steel, the wet tear of flesh, the howls of the legion fighting for their king. I didn't wait for a guard to open the door. I placed my hand on the wood. I gathered the residual pain from Ethan's body, the phantom burn of the branding iron, the ache of his torn muscles, and I pushed it into the lock. The mechanism shattered. Ethan kicked the doors open. The council chamber was a scene of opulent chaos. The rogue army had breached the perimeter, but the high council members, 5 elderly, powerful warlords, were holding them back with dark magic and elite guards. When we stepped in, the fighting stopped. Every eye turned to us. They saw the breeder, covered in the blood of the torturer, supporting the broken king. "He is alive!" a rogue shouted. "The king lives!" The roar that went up from the legion was deafening. It renewed their strength. One of the council members, a woman with white eyes, sneered. "He is broken. Look at him. He can barely stand." She raised her hand, preparing a spell to finish him. Ethan didn't move. He looked at me. He was waiting. I stepped forward, separating myself from his side. I felt the ancient power of the Spirit Walker and the Alpha Queen surge in my throat. I didn't need silver nets. I didn't need magic. I opened my mouth. Freeze! The voice hit the room like a physical shockwave. The council members stiffened, their muscles locking up against their will. The spell died in the woman's hand. The guards stumbled, their knees hitting the floor. I turned to Ethan. I pointed at the 5 council members who had enslaved him, cursed him, and tried to kill us. "Kill them," I commanded softly. Ethan moved. He was a blur of black shadow and vengeance. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He moved with human hands and animal speed. He tore through the paralyzed guards like they were mist. He reached the council. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. He didn't drag it out. He was efficient, lethal. He moved from one to the next, snapping necks, tearing throats, ending the lineage of corruption that had plagued our world for decades. When the last council member fell, Ethan stood in the center of the room, drenched in the blood of his enemies. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. The Legion watched in silence, terrified and awed. Ethan turned slowly. He looked at me across the room. The madness faded from his eyes, replaced by a soul-deep adoration. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head. Following his lead, Kale, the beta, knelt. Then the warriors, then the rogues. Hundreds of wolves knelt before me. I walked across the room, the sound of my bare feet on the marble the only noise. I stopped in front of Ethan. I placed my hand on his blood-soaked hair. "Rise," I whispered. "We are going home."
Chapter 22. The Aftermath. The journey back to the Iron Citadel was a blur of triumph, but my memory of it is hazy. Adrenaline is a powerful drug, but when it wears off, the crash is brutal. I woke up in our bed, the real bed. The furs were soft, the fire was crackling, and the smell of home, sulfur, pine, and him, was everywhere. I sat up, wincing. My body ached. My neck, where the color had been, was bandaged with cooling salves. "Easy," a deep voice murmured. Ethan was sitting in the chair by the fire. He was clean, his wounds stitched and bandaged. He held a basin of warm water and a cloth. He stood up and walked over to the bed. He set the basin down and sat on the edge of the mattress. He looked at me as if I were a hallucination that might disappear if he blinked. "You slept for 2 days," he said quietly. "The Legion?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Celebrating," he said. "They are calling you the Red Queen because you walked through blood to get me." He dipped the cloth in the water and wrung it out. He reached out and gently wiped a smudge of soot from my cheek. His hand, usually so steady, was trembling. "You came for me," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I was in the dark, Betty. I thought I was dead. And then I heard you." "I told you," I said, leaning into his touch. "I don't leave my things behind." Ethan let out a broken laugh. He dropped the cloth and pulled me into his arms. He held me carefully, mindful of my bruises, but desperate. "I am the monster," he murmured against my hair. "I am the one who breaks things. I am the one who kills." "You are," I agreed, listening to the powerful beat of his heart. "You are the sword." I pulled back so I could look him in the eye. I traced the line of his jaw, the scar on his lip. "You are the sword, Ethan, but I am the hand that wields it. Without you, I have no strength. Without me, you have no direction." He looked at me with such intensity, it felt like a physical caress. I was cursed. The madness, it was supposed to kill me. "It wasn't a curse," I corrected him.
It was energy. You were generating too much power, and you had nowhere to put it. You needed a ground. You needed a conduit. I needed you, he finished. He kissed me. It wasn't the hungry, desperate kiss of the mating frenzy, nor the rough kiss of the claim. It was slow. It was tender. It was a kiss of gratitude and absolute devotion. He pulled back, resting his forehead against mine. "Bath?" he asked, a small, boyish smile touching his lips. I laughed. "Only if you wash my back this time." "I will wash everything," he promised darkly, "and then I will worship the rest."
Chapter 23. The Forever. 6 months later. The Iron Citadel had changed. It was still a fortress of black stone and fire, but the atmosphere was different. The rogues were no longer outcasts. They were the royal guard of the new kingdom. The territories had been united, not by fear, but by the sheer, undeniable power of the Alpha King and his Spirit Walker Queen. I sat on the throne in the Great Hall, my throne, built next to Ethan's. I was listening to a petition from a neighboring pack alpha who was terrified of us. Ethan stood behind my chair. He didn't like sitting during audiences. He preferred to loom. His hand rested on my shoulder, his thumb rubbing lazy, possessive circles against my collarbone. "We agree to the trade terms," I told the trembling alpha. "But know this, if you break the treaty, King Ethan will visit you." The alpha gulped, looking up at the massive, scarred man behind me. "Understood, Your Majesty." He bowed and scrambled out. The doors closed, the court cleared. We were alone. Ethan leaned down, his lips grazing my ear. "You were scary," he teased. "I like it. I learned from the best." I smiled, tilting my head back to look at him. He wasn't just my king anymore. He was my partner, my lover, my best friend. The madness was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning vitality. He still had a temper. He still growled when other men looked at me, but he was happy. He swept me up into his arms, carrying me out of the hall and toward our private garden, the fire garden, where the glass flowers bloomed. He sat on the stone bench and pulled me onto his lap, facing him. The heat of the lava river below warmed us, but the heat between us was hotter. "I have a request," Ethan said, his hands settling on my hips, his thumbs digging in. "A command?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "A beg," he corrected, his eyes darkening with lust. He leaned forward, nipping at my jawline. "Use the voice," he whispered, his breath hot on my skin. "Tell me who I belong to." I felt the power rise in my chest, the golden, humming energy that connected us. I ran my fingers through his thick, dark hair, gripping tight, pulling his head back so he had to look up at me. I saw the surrender in his eyes, the absolute trust. "You are mine, Ethan," I commanded, the voice echoing with authority and love. "My king, my monster." He groaned, his hips bucking up against mine. "And you," I whispered, leaning down to brush my lips against his, "are a very, very good boy." Ethan roared, a sound of pure joy and possession, and claimed his queen. The end.